All right, let's jump right in. Today we're diving deep into Storm of Steel by Ernst Junger.
Mhm.
And, you shared this one with us, so I'm sure you already know that it's his firsthand account of serving in the German army during World War One.
Mhm.
But what really sets this book apart is it's so focused on the experience of combat, like the actual nitty-gritty, what it was like to be there in the trenches.
It really is like a punch to the gut when you read this account.
Yeah.
And I think it hits even harder when you realize that Storm of Steel was published in 1920, years before other famous World War One memoirs.
Right.
Like All Quiet on the Western Front came out much later.
Yeah.
And that immediacy, that rawness, really captures the shock of the war
Totally.
in a way that later accounts just can't.
Yeah, and it's important to remember, World War One was unlike anything the world had ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we're talking huge armies clashing, with all this terrifying new technology, millions of lives lost in this just brutal trench warfare.
It was really a turning point in the history of warfare.
For sure. And for so many people, it really shattered any romantic notions they might have had about war.
Absolutely.
And, that's exactly what happens to Junger in the book.
Yeah, he starts out, full of youthful enthusiasm.
Yeah.
He volunteers right away on the very first day of the war.
Wow.
Eager for adventure, glory, all of that.
Yeah.
But his naivete is so quickly stripped away when he's confronted with the reality of war.
Right.
With the horrors of the front lines.
And we see that early on, even in his training. Right?
Oh, yeah.
He forms those close bonds with his fellow soldiers, Clement Tebby, the Steinforth brothers.
Right.
But he also experiences these brutal, hazing rituals that were so common at the time.
Yeah, it's this really jarring mix
Yeah.
of camaraderie and cruelty.
Right.
And I think it really sets the tone for his whole wartime journey.
Absolutely. And it really highlights the pressure
Oh, yeah.
that these soldiers were under, even before they sought actual combat.
Imagine being a young recruit thrown into this totally unfamiliar, often terrifying environment.
Yeah.
Trying to prove yourself to these hardened veterans who have already seen the worst of it.
Right. And that dynamic shifts
It does.
once they've all been through that experience together on the front lines.
Yeah, but those initial power struggles
Yeah.
are definitely there.
So let's talk about one of those early battles for Junger, Les Eparges.
Okay.
This is where he really gets his first taste of just how horrific war can be.
Yes.
He describes the experience in such vivid sensory detail.
It's incredibly visceral.
Yeah, I mean, the deafening roar of artillery, the stench of death, the sight of all these mangled bodies.
It's almost overwhelming just to read it.
Totally. And what's really striking to me is his tone, even throughout this horrific experience.
Huh.
He maintains this almost detached analytical voice.
Yeah.
Even while he's describing, the most gruesome scenes.
It's like he's trying to make sense of all the chaos.
Right.
By just observing it clinically, almost scientifically.
Yeah, it makes you wonder about the psychological impact of war.
Oh, for sure.
Is this detachment a coping mechanism?
It has to be.
Right.
A way to distance himself from the emotional horror
Yeah.
of what he's seeing.
Yeah, like, could he even function in that environment if he wasn't able to detach in that way?
Exactly. It's like a defense mechanism that allows him to operate in a world where death is just a constant presence.
Right. And then there's this almost comical anecdote from Les Eparges
Okay.
where he nearly unscrews a live grenade thinking it's a lantern.
Oh, my God.
What?
That story,
I know.
it perfectly illustrates his naivete
Right.
about the realities of war.
Right. He's this young, educated guy thrown into this world where even the most mundane objects can be deadly.
And it's a constant threat.
Yeah.
That threat of death is always there.
And it's not just the enemy fire that's dangerous, right?
Right.
I mean, Junger talks about how grueling the routine of trench life was, the lack of sleep, the constant work, the danger from accidents and even disease.
It was a war of attrition.
Yeah.
Just surviving day to day was a victory.
It really puts things into perspective.
Yeah, the trenches were a breeding ground for disease.
Right.
And even something as simple as fetching water or going to the latrine could be life-threatening.
It's just this constant grinding pressure that wears these soldiers down.
Physically and mentally.
So from this hell of Les Eparges, Junger is sent to Douchy.
Okay.
Now, this might seem like a welcome respite at first,
Right.
but it's not exactly a peaceful retreat.
No. Douchy is this strange in-between space.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a village that's been totally transformed by the war effort.
Okay.
You've got buildings turned into military outposts, gardens overtaken by dugouts.
Wow.
It's this bizarre mix of civilian and military life
Yeah.
where the lines are constantly blurred.
Like stepping into an alternate reality, but
yeah.
even amidst this strange normalcy,
Mhm.
there are these constant reminders of the danger lurking just beyond.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Junger tells this story about the latrine being under fire
Oh my God.
and the soldiers having to scramble for cover.
No way.
Mid-well,
Yeah.
business.
It's just,
It's this darkly humorous moment
yeah.
that really captures the absurdity of war.
Right. Even in a seemingly safe haven.
There's no escaping the threat of violence.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not all grim realities in Dusha.
Yeah.
We also see how these dugouts and shelters evolve.
Mhm.
They become more elaborate, more home-like as the war drags on.
It's fascinating how
Yeah.
they adapt,
Yeah.
how they try to create some sense of normalcy in this chaotic world.
Right, like trying to carve out a space for themselves amidst the destruction.
Exactly. And you see this in the way they personalize their dugouts.
Uh-huh.
They decorate them. They even create little gardens.
That's amazing.
It's really a testament to the human spirit
Yeah.
that need to find beauty and comfort, even in the darkest of places.
Speaking of dark places, Junger's journey takes him back to the front lines.
Okay.
This time to the Somme,
Yeah,
one of the most horrific battles of the entire war.
absolutely.
But before we dive into that,
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear about that incident where he's arrested for espionage.
Oh, yes.
What?
That's such a bizarre episode.
I know.
So after visiting this young woman he'd befriended in a village,
Okay.
he's caught by military police,
What?
and they suspect him of being a spy.
Are you serious?
It's this completely absurd situation
I can't believe that.
that really highlights the paranoia
Yeah.
and the mistrust
Right.
that just permeated wartime.
So going from the front lines to being accused of espionage because you were visiting a friend.
Yeah, it really shows how quickly things could change.
Right.
You know how the lines between the mundane and the life-threatening were constantly blurred?
And it really sets the stage for his return to the front lines,
It does.
to the unimaginable horrors of the Somme.
Yeah, it's almost like a reminder that even in moments of relative peace,
Right.
the war is always there, lurking in the background, waiting to reclaim its hold on their lives.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The Somme was just a whole different level of brutality.
Yeah.
Just unimaginable.
It's hard to even fathom.
Yeah, he talks about this constant shelling,
Right.
the deafening roar of the artillery, the landscape just completely transformed
Yeah.
into this muddy, cratered wasteland.
Just a vision of hell on earth.
Really.
And, you mentioned in your notes that you were really interested in the psychological impact
Yeah.
of this kind of intense fighting on the soldiers.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
I mean, how could you not be?
Right.
And Junger, he really doesn't shy away from describing that.
Yeah, he really doesn't.
He talks about the sheer terror, that feeling of being completely trapped.
Right.
Like you're just in this meat grinder.
Yeah.
And the way the constant bombardment just wore down even the most hardened soldiers.
Yeah.
Then he has this really harrowing near-death experience in a defile that's under constant enemy fire.
Wow.
And he barely escapes with his life.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you think these experiences shaped his outlook on the war?
That's a great question.
Did they make him more fearful, or did they just harden his resolve?
It's hard to say for sure,
Right.
but I think it's probably a bit of both.
Yeah.
On the one hand, he clearly recognizes the fragility of life.
Right.
This ever-present threat of death.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you also get this sense that surviving an experience like that
Uh-huh.
against all odds,
Yeah.
really strengthens his resolve.
I can see that.
It reinforces his belief that he can endure,
Right.
that he can overcome even the most horrific challenges.
And it's not just the physical dangers, is it?
Yeah, not at all.
There's the emotional toll, too.
Absolutely.
Seeing your comrades killed,
Right.
living with this constant fear, the exhaustion.
It's just relentless.
He describes finding layers of dead bodies in the trenches.
Oh,
It's just a gruesome testament to all the lives lost in that battle.
I mean, it's just hard to imagine the impact that would have
Yeah.
on someone's psyche.
For sure. And you see that reflected in his writing, I think. The way he describes these events with this certain detachment,
Yeah.
almost as if he's become numb to the horror.
It's like a coping mechanism,
Right.
a way to deal with the unimaginable.
But it also makes you wonder about the long-term consequences, that kind of emotional suppression.
For sure.
I mean, how do you just turn that off?
Right.
So from some Junger is sent to Fresnoy.
Okay.
And believe it or not,
Mm-hmm.
this actually offers him a moment of relative peace.
Interesting.
But even then, it's a strange kind of peace.
Yeah.
It exists alongside these constant reminders of the war.
It's fascinating. Fresnoy really highlights
Yeah.
that strange duality that we've been talking about.
Huh.
On the one hand, you've got this village where Junger and his comrades can enjoy some moments of camaraderie.
Hmm.
Good food, even some semblance of normalcy.
Like a break from the madness.
Right.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's still a place that's totally dominated by the war effort.
Right.
The threat of violence is always lurking nearby.
Always present.
Yeah.
He even talks about enjoying claret and liver sausage while under enemy fire.
I love that detail.
It's just a surreal juxtaposition.
Yeah.
It speaks to that human capacity to adapt.
To find pleasure,
Yeah.
even in the most unlikely of circumstances.
Like finding those little slivers of joy
Right.
wherever you can.
Exactly.
And it's in Fresnoy that we get a glimpse into another dimension of the war,
Okay.
the air war.
Interesting.
Junger talks about the dominance of Richthofen's squadron.
Red Baron?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those almost daily dogfights taking place overhead. I mean, can you imagine
It's wild.
witnessing those aerial battles?
Both terrifying and awe-inspiring.
Yeah. Just incredible.
It's a reminder that, this war extended beyond the trenches.
It was reshaping the very nature of combat.
It really was a turning point.
Yeah, and in Fresnoy, we also see Junger's growing awareness of the psychological toll that the war is taking on him and his comrades.
Yeah.
He talks about this feeling of weariness, kind of disillusionment with the endless cycle of violence.
It's understandable
Right.
after all he's been through.
Yeah, there's this one scene that's really chilling
Okay.
where they discover the bodies of several soldiers in a bombed-out cellar.
Oh, wow.
It's just a stark reminder of how random and brutal death and war can be.
Yeah, and it really seems to affect Junger deeply.
And what's really striking to me is his reaction. He describes the discovery with this unsettling detachment.
Right.
It's like he's become desensitized to the horrors he's witnessing.
Yeah, it's a disturbing glimpse into the psychological effects
Right.
of prolonged exposure to violence.
I mean, how could you not be changed by that?
Right, it's unimaginable.
And then there's his encounter with Indian troops, the Haryana Lancers who were fighting alongside the British.
Yeah.
And this really stood out to me because it kind of challenges that simple us versus them narrative that we often see in war stories.
It's an important point.
Right.
Because Junger actually expresses
Yeah.
a certain amount of respect
Wow.
for these enemy soldiers.
Yeah.
Right. He recognizes their skill, their bravery.
Right.
He sees their shared humanity even as he's fighting against them.
It's so easy to forget that in these kinds of stories.
Yeah, it's easy to dehumanize the enemy.
Right.
But Junger, he doesn't let us forget.
No, he does.
He even leads a night raid
Wow.
to capture some of these Indian soldiers.
Yeah.
And he ends up almost getting shot by his own men in the process.
Oh my gosh.
Talk about a close call.
That story really highlights the chaos and confusion of war.
Absolutely.
That ever-present danger of friendly fire.
Yeah.
And that constant tension between camaraderie and mistrust.
That existed even among soldiers on the same side.
It's a reminder that everyone's on edge.
Yeah.
And mistakes can happen.
Absolutely.
So from this tension-filled Fresnoy, we move to Longmark,
Okay.
where Junger experiences a profound personal loss.
Oh, yeah.
He gets news that his brother has gone missing.
Wow.
And it hits him hard.
Yeah. It's a moment of pure grief and uncertainty.
Right.
He's forced to confront
Yeah.
the very real possibility
Right.
that he's lost someone he loves.
And it's a reminder that amidst all the grand narratives of war, there are these individual stories of loss and sacrifice.
That are often overlooked.
It's easy to get caught up in the big picture and forget about the human cost.
Absolutely.
But then in a twist of fate,
Right.
he has this incredible reunion with his brother in a shelter hospital.
Oh, wow.
I mean, what are the chances?
It's like something out of a movie.
Right. Just
Yeah.
this unlikely reunion in the chaos of war.
Yeah, it speaks to that enduring power of family bonds.
Right.
It's like that hope that can flicker
Yeah.
even in the darkest of times.
But Langmark itself is no haven.
No.
Junger describes this relentless shelling,
Yeah.
just this surreal imagery of burning phosphorus raining down from the sky.
Another example of that industrial scale of warfare
Right.
that defined World War I.
Yeah, the sheer amount of firepower unleashed was just unprecedented.
And the impact on the soldiers was devastating,
Absolutely.
both physically and mentally.
But despite this onslaught,
Hmm.
Junger and his men managed to hold their ground.
Incredible.
Yeah, they even repel an enemy attack while outnumbered.
Wow.
It's a real testament to their courage and resilience.
Their ability to adapt
Yeah,
and fight back.
even when the odds are stacked against them.
Yeah.
But the war is far from over,
Right.
and Junger's journey takes him to another battleground.
Regnieville. Regnieville's interesting.
Yeah.
It offers a different perspective on the war.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not just about the fighting, but also about the moments of respite.
Okay.
Those strange characters he encounters.
Right.
The moral dilemmas he grapples with.
We've really been following along on this incredible journey through the trenches, with Junger,
Yeah.
tracing his evolution from this kind of idealistic recruit to this hardened soldier.
He really goes through a transformation.
He does, and we've seen, all the horrors that he's witnessed, the camaraderie that he's experienced, and those moral dilemmas that he's grappled with.
Yeah, he's really forced to confront some tough questions.
He is, and now, as we reach this final battle in Storm of Steel Sapienes, there's this real sense of inevitability.
Like everything's been leading to this moment.
Yeah, like it was all building to this.
It's a culmination of his experiences.
It really is, and right from the start, there's this feeling of foreboding,
Yeah.
almost like a premonition of death.
You can sense it in his writing.
Yeah, but it's not fear exactly.
Yeah.
It's more like an acceptance. Like a recognition that death is always possible in war.
Yeah.
And he's made peace with that.
It speaks to how much he's changed.
Yeah.
He's not that young, idealistic guy anymore.
Right.
The one who volunteered so eagerly at the start of the war.
It's like he's been completely transformed by his experiences.
He has. He's been tempered by fire, hardened by the constant threat of death.
Right.
He's come to terms with the fragility of life.
And then the attack begins.
Yeah.
And it's just pure chaos, brutal, frenzied, fighting close calls, loss of comrades.
You could almost feel the intensity.
Yeah. And it's all described with that same detached, kind of intense tone that we've seen throughout the book.
Like he's observing it from a distance.
Right. But it feels even more heightened here.
Yeah.
Like he's operating on pure instinct.
A finely tuned machine honed for survival.
Exactly. And there's this small detail that really stuck with me,
Yeah.
just before the attack. This young soldier offers Junger a cup of coffee. It's such a small gesture,
Yeah.
but amidst all the carnage and chaos.
It's a moment of humanity,
It is.
amidst all the dehumanization.
Right. It speaks volumes,
It does.
about the persistence of human connection.
That need for comfort and ritual, even in the face of death.
Yeah.
It's beautiful and tragic at the same time.
It really is. And then in another twist of fate,
Yeah.
Junger is gravely wounded,
Oh, no.
but not by the enemy, by
Man,
friendly fire.
it's a reminder of the fog of war.
Is
That chaos and confusion
Right. Yeah.
that can lead to these tragic accidents.
the ever-present danger even within their own ranks.
It's heartbreaking.
It's like he survived all these battles, all these close calls, only to be struck down by his own side in the final moments of the war.
It's a cruel irony.
It really is. And it's just a reminder that war is inherently unpredictable,
Yeah.
that even the most skilled and experienced soldiers
Yeah.
are not immune to its random and senseless violence.
It's a sobering thought.
It is. And he spends weeks in the hospital,
Recovering from his wounds.
Yeah, and it's during this time that he really reflects on his experiences on the war, and you really get a sense of weariness from him.
Yeah.
A questioning of the purpose of it all.
But he's searching for meaning.
He is. He's searching for meaning in the midst of all this destruction.
It's a natural response, I think.
Yeah, after everything he's been through.
Trauma takes time to process.
So as we reach the end of our deep dive into Storm of Steel,
Yeah.
I'm just left wondering about its legacy.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on its impact?
Well, I think Junger's focus on the experience of war, rather than the politics or the ideology,
Right.
makes Storm of Steel this really powerful
Yeah.
and enduring testament to the human cost of conflict.
It really confronts us with the brutal realities of war.
It does.
The physical and psychological toll,
The dehumanizing effects.
the moral dilemmas.
It's not an easy read.
It's not, but it's an important one.
It is, and it's a book that's sparked a lot of debate
Yeah,
over the years.
I can imagine.
Some praise its honesty and its literary merit,
Right,
while others criticize its perceived glorification of violence.
right. Or its potential to fuel nationalism.
But I think its value lies in its ability to provoke thought,
Yeah.
to challenge our assumptions about war
Right.
and its impact on individuals and society as a whole.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier Junger's concept of the Olympian share of war.
Yeah,
This element beyond human control that kind of elevates conflict beyond just brutality.
I think it's a really fascinating idea.
It is.
And it speaks to that complex and often contradictory nature of war.
Yeah,
On the one hand, it's brutal and chaotic and often senseless.
right.
But on the other hand, Junger seems to be suggesting that there's something more to it,
Uh-huh.
something that transcends the individual,
Right.
something that elevates it to this realm of almost mythic significance.
It really is a thought-provoking concept. And it definitely leaves me with a lot to ponder.
Me too.
And for you listening, I hope this deep dive into Storm of Steel
Yeah.
has given you some new insights into this complex and controversial work.
I encourage everyone to reflect on Junger's experiences, his evolution, and his ultimately ambivalent view of war.
Yeah, and how his account might shape your own understanding of conflict. It causes its consequences and its impact on humanity.
Exactly.
Well, thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.